So the new JOJOLands chapter 21 just came out. So I'm going to be doing a recap of all the things that happened in the chapter, as well as give my own personal thoughts about it and where I think it could lead going into chapter 22. So this chapter opens up with the bank employee that we actually saw last chapter, who was in the hospital, incapacitated, but he's now seemingly okay. He's just in his office doing random things. He gets on a video call with his wife, and he explains to her how he can't be with her and the kids because he has a business emergency to attend to. And as he's explaining this to her, part of his face actually starts to crack. And when his wife tells him to tell her the magic words he usually says so that she'll forgive him, he says something that is completely wrong. And his secretary walks into the room and says how there are guests in the lobby to see him. And when he goes out, it's actually Dragona, Jodio, and Usagi waiting for him. And we find out this is just Charming Man using his stand to disguise himself as the bank teller. We find out he's using this disguise as a way to collect the money from Howler so that they can put that money directly into their bank accounts. So after this, we go to Meryl's office with the entire gang there, as well as Lulu. And it's explained to us that Meryl has been keeping not only Lulu, but the bank employee from the hospital. She's been housing them. She's keeping Lulu there to try to get information. Specifically, she wants to know if Howler knows the faces. Lulu says how since Bobby Jean is gone and they got his smartphone, that she's the only one that knows about them. But she assumes that somebody probably witnessed what happened in the hospital. But Meryl moves on from this rather quickly and goes on to asking about information on the lava rock. Specifically, if Howler was looking for the lava rock, and if so, how long has he been looking? Lulu explains how in the beginning, he was not looking for the lava rock. He just wanted to find out the people who were looking at the deeds. But as they were going, they got a sudden call from him asking them to obtain the lava rock. After hearing this, Meryl kind of goes into the reality of their circumstances, explaining how the lava rock is their ally and how the $50 billion worth of Hawaiian land will eventually come to them, but that Howler knows this. She explains how in the real world, people like Howler who are rich and greedy won't just stop at simply making sure his assets don't get taken. He will use violence as a currency. She then lays out seemingly the goal for the foreseeable future to the group, saying that they have to collect the money and the land within 7 days. Then we cut to Howler, who is just in his limousine, just being a typical rich jerk. His driver stops for some reason and he absolutely loses it. He's accosting the driver. He's calling to try to get the public road bought by him. And it pans outside of the car and we see just a whole mob of people surrounding the car, stopping it from moving. And it seems to be filled with a lot of protesters who do not like Howler. And we find out that it is now public news that the land his family acquired generations ago might have been taken illegally. After Howler moves his way through the crowd and the press, he goes into a building, and inside of this building are 3 of Howler's friends. Key West, a lawyer, Lam Chabang, police officer, and Ning Bo, a firefighter. These are seemingly other stand users who, again, are Bobby Jean's friends. They've come to meet with Howler seemingly to just try to get an explanation of why Bobby Jean was sent on this mission. What was he supposed to do? Because they found from investigating the scene at the hospital things to just be a little fishy. Howler basically just dismisses them and tells them that their main goal is to find Lulu. Their only job is to protect his interests. We then start to see Lamb use her stand, which apparently can create a map with a location based on fear, those that are afraid. We also get some interesting tidbits at the very end. Key West tells Howler not to be afraid or cower and refers to him as the final boss. And we also see that even though they couldn't recover Bobby Jean's phone, they were able to get his search history, and it's revealed that they know at least Paco's identity. So I thought that this was another really solid chapter given to us by Araki. Obviously, it's not as action-packed as the previous few chapters have been, but it makes sense because if you watched our previous chapter review video, I actually explained how chapter 20 really felt like the end of the initial act of JOJOLands, and that it was going to lead into the second, more prominent act of the manga. And after reading, I think that this chapter really just reaffirmed my thinking, because not only did we learn about the main goal of our group, at least for the foreseeable future, Meryl also explains how Howler is going to use violence as a currency to try to stop the group from taking his wealth by any means possible. And I think that Araki is basically trying to tell us that, hey, this is the part of the story now where our main characters are going to start seeing enemy stand users very frequently and actually moving towards the main goal of the story. We also get proof of this pretty much immediately when Howler meets with the three of Bobby Jean's friends, who are all seemingly stand users. They're working for him, and they're going to be actively trying to get Lulu back. So we're definitely going to be seeing our main cast fighting them in the future. What I also thought was interesting about the chapter was at the end when Key West refers to Howler as the final boss. And I really don't know what Howler's place in the story will be, whether he's just a initial plot point for our group to overcome and then eventually they face the true final villain, or if he's actually just the final boss introduced at the very beginning. Initially, we're introduced to Jobin, who is perceived by us, at least initially, to be the main villain of Part 8, and then later on, then we don't actually see the real final villain, Toru, until the very end of Part 8. So I'm just very curious to see what Howler's true role in the story will be. I personally think that Araki's just trying to fake us out again like he did with Job, and that eventually we'll actually see the true final boss of this whole thing. We also see that they now have access to Paco's identity, so this will likely be a plot device used by those three characters in the future to engage with our main cast in some way. If I had to guess, I would assume that it might be a similar situation to like what happened with Bobby Jean and Jodio in the hospital. The group will probably be out somewhere, and one, if not all of them, will recognize the photo and engage with the group in some sort of way. I can't predict how they'll engage because I don't really know their full stand, but I also think Lulu could potentially be found and maybe even killed off, because I don't really see them holding her for most of the manga, or her even joining forces with them somehow. I definitely think that she'll be found by Howler in some way or another, and probably even taken care of. So that was my recap and thoughts on JOJOLands Chapter 21. Tell me about your thoughts in the comments, if you liked it, where you see the story going in the future, and the most important thing, like and subscribe.